The Marin Women's Hall of Fame was created during the last decade to honor local women of achievement and to create a permanent record of their lives. My name is Nancy Nakai, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming Beth Ashley, the 1994 Marin Women's Hall of Fame honoree for business and professions. Congratulations, Beth, on your recent honor.
Thank you. It's fun.
We are here to create a record of your very distinguished life, and it's always easiest to start at the beginning. I know you've lived in Marin County a long time, but I don't think you started out life here in California, did you?
No, I didn't. I started out life in Newton, Massachusetts. I was born in the Newton Wellesley Hospital, and I was dyed-in-the-wool New Englander for many, many years, and I still feel like a New Englander, if you must know.
So it was a lovely time in a lovely area?
A lovely time. I was born, I hate to tell you, in 1926. My family at that time was very prosperous, and then the Depression came, and all of a sudden we gave up. My father and Mom had to give up our lovely big home and the beautiful new cars and the maid, and moved to an area that I found equally lovely. I never realized that we were having the problems we were having, but we lived a very different kind of life. And my father had to really struggle to raise, pay the money out to raise four kids. It was a lovely time, but it was, for my parents, a very hard time, I think.
There were many Americans suffering during that time.
Right. I know my mom was always worried that my dad might not come home from work. There were people, or the stories was out that a lot of people were committing suicide over there. My father had been in the banking business and had been very prosperous and then lost it all. But my father wasn't that kind of person. He wasn't going to let go of life. He enjoyed it too much.
Was there an important role model for you there?
My mom was the most important person in my life, I think. She was just a wonderful, dear, quiet, gentle, lovely person that everyone loved. I mean, she just attracted, she was a real lady, and she attracted people like flies to honey, and she was someone that I could always rely on to be nice to me. My father was absolutely marvelous also, but he was gone a lot. He was always out trying to recoup his fortunes on the road, and my mom had to really be the strong one that held the family together.
Did your mother place any specific expectations on you growing up? Did she want you to grow up and be a teacher, or?
No, I think she wanted me to grow up to be a lady.
Okay.
In those days, ladies wore hats to the market and gloves and everything, and I think that the expectation was I was going to be a nice, proper Boston lady. No, she did not. I put most of the expectations on myself. My father was extremely proud of his family, extremely loving, and he always promoted us, and we always felt better than we really were, I suspect, which is a very nice way to grow up. You're always trying to be that wonderful person that he thought you were, but there was never any, you've got to do this.
Did you have an inkling that you wanted to be a writer when you grew up, when you were younger?
I don't think I thought much about what I'd be when I grew up. I still don't think about it. But I always wrote. I mean, I was writing hideously illustrated adventure books when I was in the 4th grade, and very imitative murder mysteries when I was in the 6th grade, and always on the school paper, and always getting A's in my themes and stuff. So I felt confident that writing would be in there somewhere.
So you went from New England all the way across the country to Stanford University.
Well, it wasn't quite that simple. I said my father moved around a great deal, and we moved a lot when I was young, and I moved, I have said, and I'm not sure that it's completely accurate, it may be apocryphal, but that I went to 17 different schools before I graduated from high school. I don't know that's accurate, but I went all over. We went from pillar to post to My one year, my 5th grade, I was in Evanston, Illinois, Westbury, Long Island, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and other years I can remember being in 3 different schools. And so we did move to California, and I was already living in California when I went to Stanford.
Oh my goodness, so you had lots of opportunity to develop the ability to work with different people, to meet new people.
I suppose. I certainly had to learn how to walk into a classroom of strangers, and I didn't like it, but it doesn't faze me anymore. I think that because I moved so much, I never had any really close friends. I mean, I'm still in contact with people I went to school with, but it wasn't until I got to Stanford that I began to really form lasting friendships. So I missed that part.
Well, at Stanford, you certainly distinguished yourself.
Nancy.
Well, you graduated with high honors in 1947 from Stanford University, and you were inducted into Phi Beta Kappa, which is the most prestigious honorary society in college. Did you study journalism as your field at Stanford, and this is where you...
I did. Now, I went to Stanford during the war when suddenly all the wonderful men were gone. And it was a time of great opportunity for women. And although by the time I graduated, all the veterans were coming back, and the campus changed completely. I was on a fast track in journalism, so I did get to be the editor of the Stanford paper, and that kind of sealed my fate, I think. I thought, this is fun. I really like this. So I graduated in journalism and political science. Totally useless, probably, but I enjoyed them, so yeah.
You were there for the founding of Marin County's very first radio station,
Yes.
KTIM, and that you were their very first program director.
Yes, whatever that meant. we all had titles. I think there were about 4 of us putting the radio station together, and it was a lot of fun. I had no idea what a program director did, but I created a couple of news shows, and I did a disc jockey show. There was Kate and Tim, as in KTIM, and there was a guy and me, and we did this very silly disc jockey show. And my mother and my grandmother listened every afternoon. And as far as I know, that was about the audience. But we had a lot of fun.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? Well, how did you get from KTIM to Europe?
Oh, well, I had been looking for a newspaper job, and well, I went from KTIM actually to a newspaper job in Southern California. I was the city editor of a newspaper called the Inglewood Daily News, which I guess still exists, I don't know. And then a friend from Stanford called, and he said that he was going to Europe in something like 3 weeks, and would I like to go? And I thought, why not? So I really had nothing holding me here. I'd had a love affair that I wanted to get away from. So I thought, this is the way to do it. So I and this young man and a friend of mine from Stanford, a woman, the 3 of us took off and went to Europe.
So you were in Europe rather soon after the end of World War II.
Well, it was 1949, but it was a very interesting time to be there. We went to Paris and lived in Paris for about a year, and then I was trying to put body and soul together in Paris. I did do some freelance work for the LA Times, but it wasn't enough to keep body and soul together. So I worked for UNESCO, and I worked as an international secretary on the Champs-Élysées, and I still couldn't pay the rent. I mean, I could, but it was that kind of hard. So I decided to go up to Germany, where I had some friends working on a newspaper up there, and I found a job with the State Department as a writer. And I lived in Wiesbaden and worked in Frankfurt, and it was great. I was married for the first time over there. I married an American newspaper man, And I then became pregnant with my son-to-be, and my father died, all of this happening at once, and I came back home because my mother needed me, and then because I was pregnant, I just never went back.
So you were now back in Marin County.
Now I'm back in Marin County. Yeah.
And I understand at this point you got a job or began your career here with the Independent Journal.
First I had the baby.
Okay, first you had the baby.
Had a son. My husband came back from Germany, went to work for the Chronicle, and he and I were divorced not long after that. And I went to work first at the Mill Valley Record, very briefly, and then got a job on the Independent Journal in 1953. And because the fellow who was the news editor really wasn't interested in being the news editor anymore, he kind of owned half the paper. He really didn't want to work that hard, I guess, or he had other things to tend to anyway. He asked me if I would like to be the news editor, which was wonderful. So I was the news editor of the IJ for about 6 years before almost 7 before I left. So that was that was when it was in San Rafael, and it was a small newspaper, but we had a great time, put out a good paper.
So you left the IJ.
I met a man. Isn't that the fate of most women? Yeah, I thought that was what I wanted, and indeed it was. I met a wonderful man and married him, and he had 2 children, 2 sons. I had 1 son, and we combined families, and without a backward glance, I left the IJ because I wanted to go home and take care of my children.
And you had 2 more sons.
And we had 2 more sons, and we had a wonderful life, and I loved every minute of it. It was the best time of my life. I could scrub a floor with the best of them, and I took good care of my children, and I did all the things that women were supposed to do in the 50s, and all this was the 60s, but I enjoyed it a whole lot. We went through the 60s and the Vietnam War thing with our older boys, and that was a heavy time, but we weathered it. And then I am sorry to say my husband contracted cancer and died, and I was suddenly left there jobless and close to penniless and with 5 kids. So it was it made my life changed a whole lot right away. So.
Yeah. And in these tragic circumstances, you formed your own business.
I had to do something.
And it was a public relations business.
It was a public relations business.
And I understand it was very successful.
Well, it was. It was quite successful, but it was very high stress because there were 3 partners. We would have 9 zillion things to do at once, and I was trying at the same time to be home for my kids. So it was very difficult, and some months were very good, and some months were not so good, and I've had this need for some kind of security. So when the IJ called out of the blue and said, "How would you like to come back to the IJ?" With the complete understanding of my partners, I did leave the PR business, which went on for another year or so, and went to work for the IJ.
Of all of the trips that you have taken for writing assignments, which one is your most favorite?
Well, a lot of the trips I have taken have not been assignments. They've been self-assigned. I've done a great deal of traveling, and I have written about it. The 2 most esoteric things I did professionally, one was to do an exchange in Russia in Moscow in 1990 with an editor of the lifestyle section on the Komsomolskaya Pravda. And then in 1992, I worked for 3 months as an editor on a newspaper in Beijing. And it would be very hard to say which was my favorite of those two. I suppose Beijing, because I was there longer there. I was there about 3.5 months, and which it doesn't now seem very long, but at the time it seemed long, but it was a time of such learning for me. I think the learning curve, learning how to take care of myself in Beijing, learning how to get the subway, learning where to buy food because I was living in an apartment. Because I was working on the China Daily in Beijing, I was plugged into Western newspaper correspondence, and was very much aware of what was going on. It was an interesting time. I came away feeling more understanding of China, I think, than I expected to. I felt that they were, well, of course none of us has any tolerance for the human rights abuses that we know go on in China. I think they think that the most important human right is the right not to starve. And they have about 1.5 billion people that they have to take care of. And I think they have to, if they're going to feed those people, they've got to have some control, because it's, well, that's my unsophisticated opinion.
So you didn't find being a foreign journalist there in China shortly after the Tiananmen Square massacre, as some people call it, or confrontation, that there was no great difficulty, that you were allowed access?
Yes, I was told not to let anyone know I was a journalist when I was there. I booked my own, all tours had stopped at that point, and I just booked myself with a friend in, and we traveled all over China at that time, saw a great deal, met a lot of fascinating people, but we were escorted all the time. The few times that we had, we rented cars and went off with, we had to have someone with us. When I came out to Hong Kong, the Chinese who met me there said, "I can't believe they let you in," because I was a journalist. But that seems pretty stupid to me. I mean, anybody can go in and write. Anybody that goes can come out and write. So I think that kind of law is foolish. But anyway.
Not only were you in China at a very key time, the time that you were in Moscow was during the time of Glasnost, which was an extraordinary change of philosophy. It was the beginning of the end of communist rule.
It was a fascinating, it was a time when the economy was breaking down. It was just the reverse of what was going on in China, which was that the economy was pepping up in China, but they still had a complete political control. In Russia, they had let go of political control and said, now we're going to be free to do all of this, and the economy just went into the pits. And so I think China was taking a clue from that they weren't going to lose control, because if they did, the economy would go downhill very quickly. Terrible shortages. The infrastructure was an incredible mess. The telephones didn't work. The mail system didn't work. The electricity went off all the time. I was stuck in elevators interminably in the dark. It was a time where I could see that people would be in total despair. As a good clue to the chaos was that in spite of zillions of attempts to phone, to fax, to write, and the fact that I actually did get the visa to go, I knew they were expecting me to come, but I don't know if they really knew I was coming or not, or what they were going to do with me. So I took it on myself to devise my own program. I wrote a few stories for them, but basically I wrote for the Independent Journal. I sent 2 columns a week back. I plugged into the Associated Press wire and was able to transmit stories, and then wrote, of course, when I got back. So it was a very odd experience, but it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Have you found that in your writing life that you have chosen to, your heart has been in the big stories, the big scoops, or has it been in the daily truth of life, or what has been your...
Thank you for asking that question. I'm actually, I have never been, well, it's not true that I've never been a hard news reporter, but that's never been my specialty. It's almost always been features and what we call soft news. If needed, need be, I can do the other. I do two things. I do a column, which is a very personal thing, and I think talks mostly about the small things of life. I do feature stories, which are in large extent interviews with other people, and I have to say that the interviews with other people are the dearest to me. I love to investigate other people's lives. I love to get to know, have the opportunity to get to know other people. Some of the people I've interviewed have been, you know, mega important people, and yet some of the very, you know, what one might call hidden gems have been the people I've loved interviewing the most. It's in the quality of the people.
Well, others have called your writing that you serve as a community bridge builder, with organizations wanting you to report on their events because they know that the coverage will be fair, perceptive, and humorous. Any comments on that? Or?
Well, I liked that term, community bridge builder. I certainly don't consciously build bridges, but I do find that a lot of people phone me and say, I really want to get a story in the IJ, can you help me do it? And my response is always, of course. I mean, everybody should be represented in that paper. I think of the newspaper as being the glue, it should be, anyway, the main glue of the whole county, because it's the one thing we have in common is, well, we all have county government in common, but you don't know what goes on in county government if you don't read it in the IJ. And so I feel that everybody should be represented, and I feel everybody should be represented fairly, and I absolutely love to reach way out into the community and drag somebody in, you know, into print that ordinarily would not have a voice. And it's been my great pleasure to find that a lot of the people that might that society might revile or think poorly of, those people have turned out to be wonderful, and I like to think that I have tried to be inclusive in my writing, if anything.
In your role as a community bridge builder, you've also been on the boards of numerous county organizations. Here you have helped to found some organizations such as the Wednesday Morning Dialogue.
Oh my, yeah.
What boards have you served on?
Well, I won't be able to name them all. I think I worked on Red Cross for a long time, and I worked on, I was recruited early in my IJ career, my second IJ career, to work on the Marin Senior Coordinating Council. And at that time I was their token brown hair, but now of course I have entered the realm of senior citizen myself, and I'm still on that board. Another board that I'm working on right now with great enthusiasm is the Marin Education Fund, which tries to help people in the community who need an education of any kind, vocational or college or whatever, to get whatever education they need to be productive members of the Marin community, highly supported by the Marin Community Foundation. And I also serve on the Marin AIDS Political Action Committee, which has been a very instructive and heartwarming experience for me, because it has been a plug-in to a community that I might not have known.
You are an active mother, mother-in-law, grandmother.
Oh,
You
yeah.
are an active community board member. You are
Yeah.
very busy with your career at the Independent Journal, and yet you have taken time to co-author a book
aren't you nice?
prominently displayed here. Marin, which was a Bay Area bestseller, and I know that this last winter season you were featured at all of the area bookstores for book signings and presentations.
My giant book tour from Novato to Sausalito was fun.
Could you tell us about the book and what prompted you to do this?
Okay, well, it's kind of fun because I was taking a trip to the Soviet Far East. It was still called the Soviet Far East at that point. And on the plane to Vladivostok, I met Hal Lauritsen, the photographer, and he told me that he was writing this book on Marin County, and he had this writer, and he was taking the pictures, and I thought, darn, now that's the book I could have written. But he didn't know, he didn't take the IG, he'd never heard of me, and I said, well, okay, next time, or something. Well, his writer did not work out, and so he called me and asked me if I'd still be interested in doing it, and I said I would love to. And it has been fun. It was already underway. It had already been bought by Chronicle Books, and I just sort of fed right into the format and had a wonderful time writing it because I got to go all over Marin County and ask everybody everything and see everything. It was wonderful.
We have covered a lot of topics today.
Yes,
Is
we
there
have.
anything that we have missed?
Is there anything we have missed? I don't think so, except that at the Hall of Fame dinner, I said something that I profoundly believe, and that is that when my husband died, I thought my life was over. And I think a lot of women, when they are widowed, think their life is over. And I feel so blessed because I had a second life. I mean, I've had a wonderful life on the IJ, and the IJ has been my opportunity to get to know and be part of this wonderful community. And it seems strange to me to be in the Marin Women's Hall of Fame because all I have done has been to enjoy my life here and to try to, I guess I've tried to contribute to it, but I've only really tried to enjoy my life and do the best I could, and it's been great. So don't despair. If you think your life is over, it isn't.